I'm Superintendent Glenda Ritz, Chair of the State Board of Education, and I call the February 3rd meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Present.
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 Here.
Present. Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. We first have the approval of the agenda. With the board's consent, I would like to have the INTAS update under strategic planning come right before the two resolutions that are first on our action agenda. Are there any further changes to the agenda?
Motion to approve.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. The agenda is approved. We have no minutes to approve yet, last meeting, since we just had the meeting last week. Statement from the chair. I do have a couple of items I'd like to share with you. And the first one, Steve Yeager, if you want to join in, that's certainly fine. We had our Diploma Task Force meeting. Just to give a quick update, we met on January 27th, and we have two more meetings set up, February 17th and the 24th. We shared a lot of background information, had some great dialogue, but the focus was on math for the first session. Our next meeting will continue with math conversation, but then we will work on the two topics of special education and world language. Steve, would you like to add anything to that?
I just want to express my appreciation to the task force members. It's a fairly large group. However, I am of the opinion that the group as a whole is very open-minded and is listening to data and research and analysis, and I appreciate the fact that we have a great number of practitioners who are out there taking time away from girls and boys to come and help us with this important task. So all in all, I thought it was a great meeting. Looking forward to the next meeting on the 17th.
And in addition, Indiana will join the country, actually, in celebrating National School Counseling Week. School counseling, the recipe for success, that is February 1st, is actually this week, through the 5th, to recognize the unique contributions of professional school counselors in improving student achievement and preparing our students for the global economy. There were some awards that I'd like to announce as a result of this celebration. One is the RAMP Awards. The American School Counselor Association establishes the RAMP Award in 2013, and we've had 125 schools recognized. Actually, that's the most in the country. And then this year, 4 more schools were added: Corydon Central High School, Indiana Connections Academy, Madison Consolidated High School, and Providence Junior and Senior High School. And then the Indiana Gold Star Awards, we have 7 new schools, and we have 200 schools that are recognized with this prestigious award. So we've added College Park, Deer Run Elementary, Eagle Creek Elementary, Frontier Elementary, Perry Meridian 6th Grade Academy, and South Newton High School and South Spencer Middle School. And I would say that in my travels around the state of Indiana several times a week, I am seeing more and more elementary schools that actually have counseling programs, and it's great to see that moving in that direction. In addition, the American School Counseling Association has recognized Samantha Vidal, elementary school counselor at Creekside Elementary School in Franklin, Indiana. She's among the 6 finalists for the 2016 School Counselor of the Year Award at that national level. And so she went to Washington, D.C. in January for 3 days for celebratory and educational events. In addition, we have exemplary school counselors of the year during that 2015 school year, which was Stephanie Kozuk from Clinton Prairie Elementary School in Frankfort, and Lori Waldner from Noblesville West Middle School in Noblesville, and Sarah Graham at Peru High School in Wabash. And so I just wanted to make sure that everybody's aware that it is National Counselors Week, to reach out and say thanks to all the great work that counselors do in the state of Indiana. Next, we have board comments and reports.
Superintendent?
Yes.
May I just share one comment along those lines? And I really appreciate the work of the Blue Ribbon Panel and your efforts around teacher recruitment and retention and some of the important strategies for our state. At the same time, as you talk about counselors, I think it's very important for us at some point to think about the role of the counselor. And when we look at the number of students assigned to each counselor in our schools, as well as how many counselors have been relegated to roles outside of counseling as test administrators and other assigned duties. And I think it's really important in the role of the counselor around college and career readiness, the amount of time they can actually spend with students, helping them make informed decisions about their future. And at some point, I'd like to have a discussion about that role and what we can do as a state to increase the opportunity for our counselors to interact with our students.
So with that, I might also add that we are actually working in concert with several entities regarding school counseling and the focus that we might want to take to do just what you just said. And so the department is working with the Chamber, Indiana Chamber, who did an extensive study on counseling as we were working through the diploma work, actually going through some of the career council work. And then we are also working with Lilly in some conversation. And then we're also working with DWD. So we have, and CHE actually. So we have quite a few people at the table, all focused on counseling, and we're actually doing a lot of joint professional development work, and really we want to have more of a focus for the counselors to do the job in which they were trained, as opposed to some administrative roles sometimes that they're assigned to do. So you're on target. All right, Sarah?
Thank you. I know that when we had spoken earlier, we discussed calling a special meeting, that you wanted to separate out an item from this agenda and call a special meeting for that purpose. I was curious if that meeting has been called yet, and so that we may adjust schedules if we have a date planned for that.
So we're going to get back to you regarding that very, very soon. In fact, I think we're going to get back with John maybe even today. We are looking at the time frame. We put in rule that we need a 30-day window to put everything out for public notice. So we just want to check, make sure everything's okay, because we have a March 16th meeting. And I understand that the meeting might have been set for February 17th. So I just want to be sure that we're going to be able to adhere to the rule that we passed and make sure that everything's as we need to have it. So I think we're working through that conversation, and we'll have more dialogue about that. I just want to be sure we're going to be able to have the March 16th meeting due for the approval.
Thank you.
Madam
You're welcome.
Superintendent,
Yes.
if I may comment on that, I just want to understand are the items under which we are considering having a special meeting of a time-sensitive nature?
The one item which involves the growth table, we are in a time-sensitive nature because we not only have to approve it at a March meeting, then it has 30 days public comment before we actually get it out to the schools and says, here's the growth chart we're going to be using for this year's accountability. So I think it's the board's, desire to have that completed as quickly as we can get it completed for the field.
I just have an overall concern. I think that's fine, but I do have a concern generally speaking about scheduling special meetings unless it is urgent, and we're absolutely required to, given the involvement of the staff, the members of the board in terms of their travel schedules, et cetera. I think we need to make sure that when we do have a special meeting, it is indeed, important to have that meeting and not just, punting something out for a couple weeks. And I'm not saying that that was done here. That's just a general comment.
Oh, no, the work of the, that needs to go on this growth table is extremely important, and we want to make sure that we have everything as it should be when we bring it to the board. Lots of calculations have to take place, lots of different runs and reiterations. So we just want to be sure that we're prepared. If the board, and maybe this can be part of the dialogue that we have, I mean, the board certainly could say, bring it to us for the first time at the March meeting, but then that puts it 30 days out for the public comment, and then it moves it out even further, getting it to the field.
No, I certainly would like to expedite that, and I think probably that's a consensus of the board. And I certainly wasn't leveling any criticism. I was just making a general comment about the number of meetings we've had and make sure that we're, keeping things on our normal meeting schedule. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, Byron?
I just wanted to make a quick comment. I had the opportunity last Friday to attend the executive committee meeting of the Indiana Association of School Principals. Great dialogue with them. Appreciated that opportunity, and I think to the point that you've been talking about is a perfect segue. One of the things that they brought up was just making sure, and I think from a board standpoint, department standpoint, we need to just always make sure. And again, I'm not leveling any criticism here either, but I think it came out as a theme, and we need to make sure that we're timely with guidance. Guidance doesn't change, that there's a moving target, need more time to make changes, and then the little things do matter when tweaks are made and so forth. Those were just some themes that came out from those principles that I think it's important for us all to be reminded of occasionally, that we need to be watching that. The other thing that I will tell my fellow board members, so if you don't like this, you can blame me. They asked me to give a suggestion. Hey, what would be something that you would like? And I said, I really like it when we get briefings and things like that. So I had suggested to them maybe a weekly briefing from what they're hearing from the field, because it was great as a fellow school leader to be sitting there listening. My problems aren't always the same problems as someone else's, and so on and so forth. And so I believe they're going to be working on that to do a briefing for us. So that will be coming weekly. And so if you don't like that in your inbox, just hit delete. But I thought it would be very, very valuable for us. And so I just want to publicly state that I appreciate them spending time with me. Like I said, it was a great dialogue and very, very useful for me and my knowledge. So thank you.
All right, we're ready for general public comment. Irma Lardidel. Welcome, Irma. You have 3 minutes.
Good morning. I guess the last time I was here, I had a few more people in front of me, so I had a little bit more to comment on. But from what I heard this morning, I'd like to say thank you so much. First of all, congratulations to our counselors. There was a comment made about the things that they do. Yes, I think a lot of times they do a lot of things that the general public don't know about as it pertains to our children, and they are to be congratulated because a lot of times it takes a lot of work when you're working with children in different families and stuff, along with their education. Also, I was like to take time to thank the state practitioners, the ones that are helping with our math, because we know that's very important for our children. And lastly, thank you so much for networking with our principals. I went into my granddaughter's school, and one of the things I was kind of concerned about, I think we have 4 tests back-to-back coming up from the month of January until the month of March that our principals are making sure that our teachers are lined up with. And I think it's great that we network with them and find out on a weekly or a monthly basis what's working and what's not working with our children. I think this way we all can advance. Also, Mr. Melton, he's not here, but I wanted to ask him about the heat. I didn't get a chance to comment on it last time, the problem with the heat with the children in Northwest Indiana. I would like to know how are we coming with that and has anything been done? Thank you so very much.
Thank you. Brad Lindsay, Marion Community Schools.
Thank you for this opportunity to share. And I would like to say that I'm representing Marion Community Schools here today, and so those are my perspectives and vantage point. I'm so thankful for the teachers and educators that we have that have chosen to take that mission on and live it out every single day. I've been in education for 30 years, and so I know what it feels like to be a high school administrator at a county bump in Marion County. I know what it feels like to be a principal at a high school on the southeast side of Marion County. I know what it feels like to be a superintendent on the southwest side. What I would say, what I've never experienced before until the last 3 years, is the level of poverty, diversity, special needs, and mobility that I've experienced the last 3 years. Everywhere I've been, teachers and educators work extremely hard for their children. We own them, we love them. We act in their best behalf. Everywhere I've been proud of our teammates and our mission. Never before have I experienced teachers and educators that work harder than our kids. I want to thank Superintendent Ritz, the partnerships that we have with your Title I team, on this SDN network team, outreach coordinator. Those are all helpful. But what I'd like the board to consider, and I've submitted my thoughts in writing, is our children are why we exist. Without children, without students, there is no ministry or business of education. And our children are our future, so that is our highest stakes priority that we possibly can have. In the state of Indiana, it seems like for years, we've set up sometimes a win-lose situation. So when I think about our children and I think about our future, our cause, I don't understand why there needs to be a win-lose situation. When I think about win-win-win, I think about win, acronym, who's important now? And those are our children. And what's important now is providing our children, all of the children of all the people, our best. And what's important next is to continue to do the same. This past year, last week, I was thankful to hear from a colleague that they received more money from the state coming out of last legislation. That was not the case for Marion Community Schools. We had almost $1 million less through general fund. We just received the performance-based teacher grant results. And once again, it kind of proves what standardized testing has always proven. Standardized testing has not told us anything new that we haven't already known. And right now, I believe, I'd like to hear the talk that's occurring. I know that the state board, you guys are part of the solution. Thank you for taking on this mission. And as we move forward, I believe the time is right for change, for local accountability. Nobody feels that more than us. When without students, there is no business. Right now, students can stay at home. Students can go to another school. Students can go to a charter or private. There is local accountability. So moving forward, what I would ask is local accountability with our educators, our growth council, our chamber leaders, our school board, our city leaders, our local media, our local state community colleges, our local private universities, and come up with our own accountability system that we can act on in the best interest for our audience, which is parents choosing their schools for their children. High stakes accountability is parents' choice for schools. That's all the high stakes accountability that we need. I'd ask you to please read my thoughts And I want to be part of the solution. I want to join the team and build speak life into some of these solutions. And I'd like equitable balance in all these decisions from urban to rural to suburban, small and big, equal balance, because we all have missions and speaking from our own worldviews. And I think all worldviews need to be a part of this solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Scott Simpson.
Superintendent Ritz, Board of Education, thank you for allowing me to speak this morning. My name is Scott Simpson, and I'm a teacher at Marion High School. I teach math and science, and according to some of our state legislators, I should be able to negotiate my own contract to the detriment financially of my colleagues who are teaching impoverished children to read, which is totally wrong. Yesterday, the DOE finalized the parent performance grant amounts, and before you think I misspoke, have a statistician plot on the x-axis the median income of families, and on the y-axis the amount per teacher that was given in those performance grants. And I think you will find a very strong correlation, and in fact, if you do the line of best fit for that scatter plot, you will find that there is a very positive slope, something I teach my math students every single day. 50 years of research have shown what poverty does to students, highlighted in one study done at Johns Hopkins University by Olson, Entwistle, and Alexander, published in the American Sociological Review in April of 2007. And it shows not only do students from low socioeconomic families come in behind their peers in school, but that the difference in their growth is attributed to the summer, not because of what is happening in schools. As a matter of fact, if you read that study, you will see that low socioeconomic students actually grow more during the school year than their high SES peers, but the growth gap continues to widen because the low SES students take a step backwards in the summer and high SES students continue to grow during the summer. To build a so-called accountability system for our schools and our teachers based on a growth model, on a standardized test, will continue to measure family performance, not performance in our schools. The achievement gap will continue to widen. The state can save a whole lot of money, man-hours, and the embarrassment of miscalculations if they simply plot median family income against schools and assign grades that way, if we're going to continue to have an accountability system based on a standardized test. The sheriff of Nottingham is alive and well in the state of Indiana. The rich will get richer in performance and growth, and the poor will get poorer. There is no one who owns their students and their growth more than the teachers at our poorest elementary school, because they know that in many cases they are the only advocates for our students. May I finish?
You may.
The teachers of Marion truly live a modified version of Emma Lazarus's poem on the Statue of Liberty. Give us, you're tired, you're poor, your huddled masses yearning to be educated. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed, to us. We take them all. State Board of Education, we need you to be Robin Hood. We need you to design a system of accountability that measures what schools and teachers do, not how families perform. We need you to be our advocates for early learning. We need you to provide opportunities for our students during the summertime so that those learning gaps that are well documented to happen over the summer can be closed. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item for us to consider is the consent agenda. You have 3 items: special education child count verification, approval of the March 16th and May 11th, 2016 business meeting dates, and career specialist pedagogy provider approval. You have memos on all of those. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve.
Do I have a second? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. The consent agenda is approved. Next, we're going to have discussion regarding the INTAS update under the Strategic Planning Committee, and then we'll take new business items action, the first 2 resolutions to recognize schools with exemplary educator evaluation systems. Sandy?
Madam Superintendent, if I may just
You may.
make a quick introduction. We're very pleased as part of the Strategic Planning Committee to be looking at improving our teacher evaluation system here in the state of Indiana. And as you will recall, in February of 2015, TMTP made their final recommendations to this board regarding improving teacher evaluation in Indiana. And in July, the board approved the contract with Indiana University to have the Indiana Teacher Appraisal and Support System, INTAS, begin their work to support the State Board of Education and the Department of Education on implementing those recommendations. As the department reviews the teacher evaluation plans from districts, the DOE has recommended to INTAS districts for their recommendations to INTAS districts for their review. INTAS has reviewed districts to ensure they are using best practices in not only the development of the educator evaluation system, but also implementing that system with fidelity. And so we're going to hear today from Dr. Sandy Cole, as well as Dr. Hardy Murphy of Indiana University and the INTAS, as well as we're going to recognize with 2 resolutions 2 school districts today for their good work in this on this project. So we'll be joined by the superintendents and the school district representatives shortly. But first, I'd like to introduce Dr. Sandy Cole to provide us with an update and update of the INTAS project. Thank you, Doctor.
Good morning.
Good
I
morning.
guess this doesn't bend for short people.
Yeah.
It's okay. Dr. Murphy and I are really happy to be here to talk to you and give you a brief update. But more importantly, I'm going to keep the update for some of the aspects of our project short so that we can actually honor the districts that are here today. We shared with the Strategic Planning Committee some of the pieces of our work that we are deep into at this point. We have a pretty strong research agenda. There are 2 parts to that research agenda. The first part is to really gather about 5 years worth of student data and teacher data from the DOE to begin to look at whether or not a certain weight makes any difference or has any impact on student outcomes and teacher performance. And we're looking primarily at the weights that are attached to student learning, the part of the teacher evaluation that is currently matches the rubric and observation piece. The second part of our research is looking at the different plans that the districts have submitted, and we're doing a plan audit to look at what characteristics are in these plans, what characteristics might in fact impact certain outcomes for students and teachers. And we also, as a part of that audit, are looking at what are the measures, both standardized and non-standardized measures, the districts are using in their evaluation plans. The report for the plan audit will be submitted to you by the end of March, and the research related to the student growth weights will be submitted to you at the end of the year. So you will be getting those reports. We also have rolled out level 1 evaluator training for evaluators in the state, and this is an online, these are online modules that evaluators can participate in, and at the end of those, if they complete those modules, They receive a certificate that is signed by both the State Board and the DOE. We also are working on some superintendent resources to provide to superintendents around the state on teacher evaluation. And we are also looking at supporting the DOE and the districts around teacher engagement. And what does that look like in a teacher evaluation process? And then finally, the part of our work that actually is extremely exciting because we get to really look at what districts are doing is our district recognition. Excuse me. Since the INTAS project was created several years ago, we have always tried to support districts to develop and implement equitable, efficient, and effective teacher evaluation systems. And we wanted those systems, and we wanted to support districts to ensure that they supported teacher growth and student growth. And that was our focus. We were supported by you, the State Board, and working collaboratively with the DOE. We created a process to begin to look at what districts are doing it well and what are they doing as a part of teacher evaluation that has student outcomes and teacher outcomes that are effective. I want to just share briefly before we introduce the districts what this process entails so you have an idea of how we work through this with the district. The first step is that the Department of Ed recommends districts to us, and those districts are recommended based on their on-site monitoring for compliance. So the very minimal level these districts have to reach compliance. The districts are then sent to us, the INTAS team, and we then send a letter of invite to the district superintendent for participation in our process. At that point, a district leadership team is formed, and those leadership teams may have already been formed and may have been working in the district, but they're made up of teachers, central office people, and principals, very representative groups in these districts, and they take part in a gap analysis. And that gap analysis is a time for them to look critically at their plan and to address whether or not there are gaps in terms of what's in those plans. And we use the INTAS rubric for that, and I think you have in your packets a copy of that rubric, but those are standards that we say, this makes an effective plan. After they do the gap analysis, they then typically will do an action plan. Now, the districts that are coming to you for recognition often don't have large action plans because they don't usually have large gaps in their plans. But they do an action plan, and as a part of that, they say, what are the things we need to improve this plan? What do we need to do? They then work on that action plan and at some point tell us that they're ready for an implementation review. So we use the INTAS implementation scale, which you also have available to you, and then an INTAS team comes in and works with the district leadership team to look at implementation fidelity. So as you know, you can have something on paper and it can say we're going to do X, Y, and Z, but if in fact they're not really implementing X, Y, and Z, then that's not an efficient and effective and equitable system. So we really look at the fidelity of implementation. The districts have to score 80% on our implementation scale in order to reach fidelity. And when they do that, they then are forwarded to you. The last part I want to mention here is that as a part of the implementation review, they are required to conduct a survey. And that survey is a survey of all their teachers and administrators around implementation. So it's not just us coming in and saying, yeah, we're going to check this off, and you're doing well, and you say you're doing well, and everything's good. We say we want to hear from teachers, and we want to hear from principals as to whether or not you're implementing. And so at that point, we then say, you've reached implementation fidelity, we're moving these districts forward. So today, we will have our first two to present to you. We have, I believe, 9 more who are in the process of reaching this implementation. And so I'm very, very pleased today to be up here to acknowledge these districts.
Well, if we could call up both districts, and we'll start with Fairfield Community School District. I believe we have Superintendent Steve Telheimer. And what I'm going to do is, Superintendent, I'm going to I think it's important for us to read the resolution, and then if you could give just some brief remarks. But we're glad to have you here today. I think it's important. I probably say this every time Doctors Cole and Murphy come before us, but I'm just so pleased with the work that they're doing on our behalf to improve teacher evaluation in Indiana, and they're doing outstanding work on our behalf. So I'd like to start by reading, if I may, Superintendent, the first resolution. Indiana State Board of Education resolution recognizing Fairfield Community School District. Whereas Fairfield Community School District or Corporation has served as one of the founding districts of the Indiana Teacher Appraisal System of Supports, INTAS, project, which offers support in designing, implementing, and monitoring teacher evaluation systems, training teacher evaluators, and supporting teachers to engage in evaluation and professional growth opportunities, and has embodied the principles and beliefs of INTAS. And whereas Fairfield has met the standards of state compliance in the teacher evaluation process, and whereas Fairfield has met the standards of quality plan development included in the INTAS plan development rubric, and whereas Fairfield has exceeded the standards of implementation required in the INTAS implementation fidelity scale, and whereas in 2012 Fairfield created the Fairfield Teacher Appraisal and Support System, FTAS, using an exemplary process for developing classroom-based assessments that maintain rigor, and whereas I lost my place here. Whereas Fairfield Teacher Evaluation System has exemplified a supportive, collegial, transparent system which has added value to the culture of teaching and learning in the district, and whereas Fairfield has created an equitable system of high expectations by expanding the evaluation system to non-certified staff and aligning teacher evaluations to administrator and superintendent evaluations. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the board recognizes the exemplary development and implementation of the Fairfield Teacher Evaluation System as a best practice in educator evaluations. Congratulations.
Thank you very much to the members of the board and to Superintendent Ritz for this recognition. I'm humbled that our district of 2,100 students, about 130 teachers, guidance counselors, special education staff, and administrators, is the first district recognized for this work. And I echo the same compliments to Dr. Cole and Dr. Murphy, the INTAS staff, for the things that they did to help put us on the path. Years ago, a building principal and I went to a presentation that Dr. Murphy was doing, and as he spoke, I said, you know, we as a small district do not have the resources and the expertise ourselves to be able to guide through this new legislation that was coming and this process. And so we were lucky enough, smart enough, whatever you'd like to say, to attach ourselves to INTAS back as one of the founding members. By doing that, we put ourselves into a great conversation with other districts around the state, large and small. We called upon the expertise of university personnel, and we were able to look at best practice and decide what works for us within our district in a small rural environment with students ranging from poverty up to those who are going to go off to college and do well. And I have an elementary school that's 70% Amish. So for us, we had a lot of opportunities and challenges and things to work through within our plan. And the template they gave us, the things that they asked us to think about, really helped us do that well. Things within our plan that we're proud of and that I'm proud of, actually, this is my day off this week from meeting with every teacher in my district to talk to them about their final evaluation results and the compensation model. So beginning last Friday, I park myself in a school building and teachers come to me in 15-minute increments, and I talk to them about what are their final evaluation ratings, where do those come from, And then we talk about what that means for their compensation model. That's a little bit in flux because those performance pay amounts change, but we roll with it. So that is one of the things that as we've moved through the process, I and my administrative team, my principals feel is very important, because we want to make sure that people understand where their evaluations come from, where their performance pay comes from, how the compensation works. And as we went through this process, we would hear the horror stories of teachers who would get an evaluation and have no idea where it came from. They would receive a compensation check, have no idea where it came from. So we've used technology in ways to roster up students so that teachers know precisely who they're accountable for. They're in control of that. If there are extenuating circumstances around a student, that student's data should potentially not be included in the results. We have a procedure for discussing that. And I have a teacher appraisal oversight committee that meets at least 3 times a year. This year we're meeting more frequently in order to look at aspects of the plan that are in need of review. So we're actually using that teacher appraisal committee to look at which one of the local assessments we would like to use through the local assessment grant and advocate moving from the current system and the current instrument we're using potentially over to NWEA, because that impacts teacher evaluation, because those growth results would be part of that. In doing that, we also try very hard to have developed rigorous learning goals and learning measurements that were locally developed by teams of teachers within their departments and within the content areas. And then the other thing that we have within our plan is that we look at concentric circles of what happens within our building and the accountability we have for students. So I, as a teacher, have my classroom measure, then we go out a little bit with that to what we call a division, and that division would be people who are sharing content or linked content or a grade level within an elementary school, and then we have a small percentage that's a school accountability grade. So we go from me to us in trying to keep a culture of collaboration that we had started with some Late Start Wednesday professional learning communities that we were doing. So all of those are highlights of our plan and the things that INTAS helped us develop. I am, again, humbled to be the first as the districts to be chosen, but I also take it as an honor for a validation for all the work of our teachers, our administrators, the support of our school board, and particularly the work that all of our teachers do every day and did in designing this process. So again, thank you for this honor very, very much.
Thank you so much.
You are welcome. And if we could have a motion to adopt the resolution recognizing Fairfield Community School Corporation's teacher evaluation system.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Yes.
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 Yes. Ms.
If we could call up Superintendent John Quick from Bartholomew County, or Bartholomew Consolidated School Corporation. Welcome, sir.
Thank you.
I would like to just go ahead and read the resolution again, if you'll indulge me in that, Madam Superintendent, and then we can hear from Superintendent Quick briefly. Indiana State Board of Education resolution recognizing Bartholomew Consolidated School Corporation. Whereas Bartholomew Consolidated School Corporation, BCSC, has served as one of the founding districts of the Indiana Teacher Appraisal System of Support's INTAS project, which offers support in designing, implementing, and monitoring teacher evaluation systems, training teacher evaluators, and supporting teachers to engage in evaluation and professional growth opportunities, and has embodied the principles and beliefs of INTAS. And whereas BCSC has met the standards of state compliance in the teacher evaluation process, and whereas BCSC has met the standards of quality plan development included in the INTAS plan development rubric, and whereas BCSC has exceeded the standards of implementation required in the INTAS implementation fidelity scale, and whereas in 2012, BCSC created a unique, locally developed plan grounded in the district's values and instructional focus based on an observation rubric, which was collaboratively designed and research-based, and whereas BCSC teacher evaluation system has exemplified a supportive, collegial, and transparent system which has added value to the culture of teaching and learning in the district, And whereas the BSCS teacher evaluation system included longitudinal survey data assessing perceptions and attitudes of teachers, which showed an increase in teacher satisfaction. And whereas the BSCS teacher evaluation system exemplifies the district's belief for teacher evaluation to reach the levels of the school board and superintendent by including training to the school board on the rubric to evaluate the superintendent. And whereas the BSCS teacher evaluation system gathered student feedback through school-wide learner outcomes and is a model for how student feedback can inform teacher evaluations. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the board recognizes the exemplary development and implementation of the BCSC teacher evaluation system as a best practice in educator evaluation. Congratulations. So if we could hear from Superintendent Quick, and then we'll consider the resolution.
Thank you. We are also humbled. I have with me the president of our school board, Dr. Jill Shedd, who was a big part of this project also. On behalf of our school board, our 12,000 students coming through the door and 1,800 employees, we're happy to be here today and to be recognized. This project gave us the flexibility, and with good partnerships, such as you've heard from our university partners here, we built good relationships. If the new 3 R's are relationships, relevance, and rigor, relationships the most important. And as I think about how we designed this, and again, we put good people together, and we gave them support, at least from my office, and so we had administrators involved, but we involved our Continuous Improvement Council at the corporation level and our Continuous Improvement Councils at each site level. Our Continuous Improvement Council is a three-legged stool. It's 1/3 administrators, 1/3 teachers, and 1/3 others being parents, support staff, and so forth. And so each of those monthly meetings, this would be a part of that design. So our teachers were very much a part of this from day one, as well as other folks in our organization. And we looked at this as a cascading effect in that my evaluation mirrors the teacher's evaluation, and it contains the things we believe in: universal design for learning, positive behavior instructional support, professional learning communities. Those things are in there and part of that evaluation and part of our professional development. So the board evaluates me, then I evaluate 7 people, and then it cascades down through the organization. And even so, if you're a lay football coach for us, it looks similar to what the teachers have, so that everyone understands what we're about. So again, I'm real thankful for that. We believe in making decisions closest to students. You allowed us to do that, and I encourage you to continue that. We see that trend at the national level with the reauthorization of ESSA, and gives us, I think, as a community of educators, the opportunity to model that and to be able to cascade that down so that we make decisions closest to students while still keeping everyone accountable, and that's, I think, the system did that. So I appreciate it, and we're honored to be here today. Thank you.
Is there a motion to adopt the resolution recognizing Bartholomew Consolidated School Corporation's teacher evaluation system?
Motion to approve.
Second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Yes.
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 Yes. Motion carries. Congratulations to both school corporations. Oh, yes, Leanne.
Well, I would just like to commend both districts for the time and the effort that they put in with their principals, their teachers, and staff to create the effective systems. We know that the teacher evaluation systems are extremely important, and having 2 districts come forward today for the rest of the state to be able to contact and learn some of those best practices is great. I also appreciated hearing how you have the accountability, but you also created a system to make sure that you continue with great collaboration among your staff. So good job for both districts.
Yes, David?
I'd like to echo what my colleague just said, but I have a question maybe for our IU colleague who's leading this effort. Being on strategic planning, we've seen an evolution of this process, and I think it's a really important process to create beacons of success, and these are the first two beacons that we have, and thank you for that. And so Sandy, my question is, how do we expand this good work throughout the state of Indiana? We're working with a small group, and I understand the concept being let's build some small successes and demonstrate that this can be done in a fair and transparent way where teachers feel really good about it, school leaders feel good, school board members feel good. And so the reform effort that was done by people a little before us, before we got on the board, but we're standing on the shoulders of people who've really made some good reform efforts. And this is the result of it, that we have some successes now. So how do we build this into a statewide network of best practices in teacher assessment?
Well, first of all, I think I need to say that there are many, many more districts out there that are doing great work and would come to you soon, as soon as we can have the capacity to get out there to do the implementation review. So I need to say that first. I think the second thing is our hope is that as districts come forward to you and become known to the state, that they can become resources for other districts. So as you heard, these are two very different districts in terms of what they're doing and how they're doing it. And so these districts as a resource, I think, is another level that we can begin to push out. The third thing is that we have expanded our consortium to districts who have either been recommended to us from the DOE or who have sought us out to help them with any part of their plan or any issues they're dealing with. So we have expanded, we've almost doubled our InTask consortium, and the consortium really is a place where we hope to continue to bring others up to the standards that we have presented today and push them out as well. So I see it as multiple ways to get this done. One is the support of the DOE, who've been incredible in terms of pushing folks to us after that on-site review, and they've been great about recognizing great practice. The second thing is word of mouth. I think the teachers in these districts, they're the best resource for other teachers to be able to say, this can be done well, and it has to be done well, because if we don't do it well, it really does harm, in my opinion, teachers and administrators. And then I think the third thing is to just begin to keep this process going and to continue to bring folks to you for recognition. There's another way districts can do this. They can be recommended to us from the DOE, or they can also self-nominate. And if they self-nominate, they have to have been through the process with the DOE for compliance, but they can self-nominate.
Second question deals with the online modules that you talked about in our committee meeting. We talked at length about sharing that not only with school districts, but teacher preparation programs, particularly school principalship, school superintendent programs.
Right.
And it seems to me if we can get this information at that level, so new principals coming out will have those competencies, it will just add to what we're doing in Indiana. Are those modules available now to teacher education, colleges, and universities? And are they also available to districts that may be watching this thinking, I may want to jump on board with this and may give me some information to self-nominate a particular district? So is that available? And if so, how is that available to people?
They can go to the InTask website, just Google InTask, and they'll get to our website. That's where they'll find the link for the evaluator training, the level 1 modules. And those are, we have pushed those out through ISTA and AFT, as well as through the administrator organization. So that is accessible, and we hope that people who are watching will go to the INTAS website for that. As far as the higher ed institutions, it's fortuitous, I guess, that Dr. Murphy is teaching a course, go figure, on teacher evaluation at IUPUI. I know he uses this in his own training. We talked in the strategic planning committee about pushing this out to the deans of schools of ed, because I agree with you. I think that in our conversations with our INTAS team, we know that teachers and principals coming out of programs need to have certainty around this concept of evaluation and what it means for them and how it looks and should look. So we intend to push that out to the deans.
Thank you for your great work.
Thank
We're
you.
really impressed by it.
Yes, Leanne?
So you mentioned that you have online modules and teachers or principals can get certificates. Do you have a way of tracking to know how many people have viewed those? And I think it would be interesting for us to be able to get some of that data to see how widespread those modules are being used.
Right. We did give a number to the strategic planning committee, and that number is not coming up in my head right now in terms of our first semester, but we are tracking it, and we're not just tracking the numbers, but we're also, at the end of the modules, folks complete a short survey to give us feedback so that we are constantly looking at ways to improve it as well. Our initial semester was last semester, and our feedback in terms of satisfaction was very high, so we felt good about that. We have tweaked the technology a little bit because you're always tweaking technology, but the feedback has been helpful for us. Thank you. You're welcome.
I think I could help you out with that, Sandy. So 257 educators completed one or more of the modules to date. 153 educators completed all modules and received a certificate to date. And the survey data indicated 80% of the participants were satisfied with the training. You're welcome.
Could I comment, please?
Yes.
First, I'd like to congratulate both districts. It is an honor to be here, especially to be the first districts recognized. And I think a key component that hadn't been mentioned here is the fact that's obvious with both superintendents is that this is produced truly as a support system. It's not, your teachers don't feel threatened, your teachers aren't, it's not a gotcha system with them. And when you have that, you have buy-in from teachers. As an educator myself, I'm in the same situation with a great superintendent who works with us. And the fact that you go out and sit down and talk with your teachers to make sure everything is understood, I think almost every educator in Indiana, as long as they know what's expected of them, they're going to accomplish that goal. And I commend you both for taking the time to sit down to talk with your educators and make sure that they're comfortable. And the fact that when you point out areas where you can grow, it's not saying that you're not a great educator, it's just how can we help you get better? And that's truly, in my opinion, the intent of teacher evaluations. So, job well done.
Any more comments? All right. Thank you both for attending today, and congratulations again. Very exciting work with teacher evaluation, and I commend the individualization of owning your own system. Congratulations. The next item on the agenda is approval of proposed teacher preparation program rule. You received a copy of it. I just want to point out one word change to let you know. It'll be changed during the process of actually doing the rule, but I wanted to bring it to your attention. So it's on the second page, and it's section 3, and it says teacher preparation program shall provide candidates with rigorous content and pedagogical skill development. It should say teacher preparation programs will meet or exceed the minimum requirement matrix rating for each of the following instead of candidates, okay? And then that is repeated again really in letter C right down there below too. It says the teacher preparation program must meet or exceed the minimum required. So that will be changed. We don't need to amend today, but if somebody wants to amend today, we certainly could do that as well. So you've had, is there a motion? There's a motion to approve the proposed rule regarding teacher preparation. Do I have a second? Okay. Roll call, please. Oh, any more discussion? Sorry, any discussion? All right, roll call.
Yes.
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 Yes. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is school quality reviews. And I just wanted to give you the update that I said I promised you, and so it was passed out to you at the beginning of the meeting. You can see the number of schools that are in 4 years quality reviews. In addition, we provided for you the schools that are in the year 5 hearing and preparation for interventions, and the 2 schools that are in year 6 state intervention resolution for plan. So that information is up to date. There's a motion to approve entering into a memorandum of understanding with the Department of Education for the purpose of conducting school quality reviews as required by IC 20-31-9-3. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Yes.
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 Yes. The next item on the agenda is the formative assessment grants. You've received the information. Is there a motion to approve the formative assessment grants?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any discussion? Yes, Sarah.
Question. Looking at the chart here and seeing that there is estimated remaining funding of $236,000, just looking for a little clarification on what that funding goes to. Does it stay in the pot? Can it be reallocated to the schools that had previously been awarded their, set amount, max per student or max per test? What's
Sure.
the plan for that
Sure.
funding that's just left over at the
Danielle?
Yeah, so like last time when we came and brought the formative amounts, there was a larger dollar amount difference. And I believe the plan was to seek I don't know the correct financial term, but a reversion back into the monies for the pot for next year, because we anticipate now that people are aware of the opportunity, maybe even more aware, that we'll have more people wanting to take advantage.
So that has been confirmed that that money will go?
I've not received word it's been confirmed, but that's the plan to seek when we send this dollar amount after your approval for processing to the financial bodies.
And if it doesn't, does it just get lost, or does it?
Sure. I'm
Follow
going to
into
turn to
another
somebody
account?
financially maybe that might know the answer to that.
Michael?
It's a great question. We looked at how much that would be if you dispersed it out per pupil, and it was like a penny a head, so it wasn't worth that difference, but rather putting it in a lump sum forward is our plan.
Yeah, we met with Brian Bailey from State Budget Agency and made that request. Because we kind of anticipate more private schools, Troy schools are probably seeking to participate in formative assessments next year. So to be safe, we asked that those funds be reverted, or not, that's not the right term either, but applied to next year, and it seemed that would probably likely happen, but we haven't got official confirmation.
Can we just receive an update on that once
Sure.
you receive final word there?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any more discussion?
Just
Steve?
clarification, thank you, Superintendent. The maximum total grant was 12 million, and as we just early on divided that out, it was $18.96 per student for grades 3 through 10. Am I correct in reading this chart?
You are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Danielle. Did you
No,
have
I was making sure you're looking at the February is 1896, and in November it was 1968. I don't know what chart you're looking at, Dr. Yeager, for
1890.
certain.
They only received one chart. Are you wanting to show them on the
Yeah,
update?
if you don't mind, I'll show you on the, it's
There
also
is,
in our,
there is part of answer to your question in our assessment update.
That's
We should
really
go
hard
ahead
to
and look at
read.
that now.
I apologize. Okay, Sarah, this is the December presentation. Where's Sarah Rossier? We need to go to today's presentation for this question.
Oh, yeah, that's the wrong one.
Well, to go further with my
Sure,
question.
go ahead.
So where we are now, and what we talked about then was another grant that had approximately $3 million in it. Is that included or excluded from this number?
It was not needed.
Was not needed?
The K-2 literacy grant, we were able to continue our work with literacy at the schools and give those grants out.
Sorry, Dr. Yeager, here's maybe a better view of what you're looking at. In the 310 space, you referenced the $18 amount. That is what we're bringing forward
Yeah, that was
today.
an original estimate, I think.
Oh, no, it's just
correct?
a formula.
The original estimate that we brought forth in November was $19.68 per student. Through all the quality checks and the final distribution, it's
Okay.
bringing it down to $18.96 per student in grades 3 through 10.
Okay, that was an estimate, correct? But
Correct.
the actual figure is $948.
Yes, per content test per student, yes.
Okay, that helps, thank you. And that distribution will occur when?
We're hopeful by the end of February, again, pending your approval and then getting it to the financial bodies for sending out. Initially, the plan was 2, so it would be now and then at the end of the school year. We've worked it out so they can get it all in one lump
So you're
sum
going to do
here by
one
the end
lump
of the month.
sum sometime late this month, early
Yep,
March?
that's our goal.
Thank you.
Roll call, please.
Yes.
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 Yes. Next item is the approval of school corporation grades. You received information. The grades that to be placed for the 2015 school year are listed in the category on your chart under 2015 hold harmless. There's a motion to approve the final placement of school corporations into categories for school accountability. Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Yes.
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 Yes. And I would like to add again my thanks to the legislative body for passing Senate Bill 200 and House Bill 1003. The next item on the agenda is final determination hearings for schools in the 5th year of the State Board of Education intervention. There's a motion to approve entering into a memorandum of understanding with the Department of Education for the purpose of conducting the hearings required by IC 20-31-9-9C. Is there a second? Discussion? Oh, Sarah? I gotta look both ways.
Just for some clarification, this impacts the 16-17 school year, correct? The decisions that will be made on the schools that are currently under determination, heading into hearings,
Yes,
this
I
would be an
believe
impact for.
that's the impact. Mike, do you want to speak to it?
So the 3 schools that are
'Cause
under
we're
state board
behind.
intervention, the CSUSA schools and IPS and then Gary Addison are in their
Right.
last year of intervention. So yes, that would affect next year.
Okay,
So the schools will either go back to IPS and Gary or one of the interventions that are allowed in statutes will take place.
Right. So what is our timeline for notification? In other words, once we have our hearings, when should these schools expect to know a definitive plan for moving forward with the next school year?
It's going to be hard to say because we had to, so the board has to hold public hearings, take comment, and then come back and make a decision. There are 3 options available to the board. And then once those options are made, that's when you would give notice to the school corporations. So I know Brian and I have been talking, we're trying to get the Edison hearing done quickly since it's far away. Ideally, we'd like to have that early March, maybe mid-March. And then the board would meet at the next available meeting to make a decision about one of the 3 options that's available to the board.
And I guess my caution would just be that we keep in mind that depending on some of the different options that are available, some of them do require some legwork or some reorganization. I just want to make sure that we are cognizant of that as we move forward. Obviously, there's a process in place here, but I want to make sure that none of our decisions or none of our timeline impacts students heading into the next school year, that they have ample time to understand exactly what their school looks like and what the game plan will be.
Yeah, that's our concern as well. We've been meeting about once a month, board staff and department staff on turnaround efforts, and we've all recognized that time is of the essence, especially with school up in Gary.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, David, and then Leanne.
Seeking clarification on the motion. The motion says that we're approving a memorandum of understanding between DOE staff and state board staff. So we're approving a process? Is that what this recommendation
Well,
is?
I'll let Brian speak to that, but I think it's just going forward with an MOU.
Yeah, so the vote today is just basically saying staffs go forward and conduct this as quickly as possible. And typically there's been involvement by department staff because department does make a recommendation at some point as part of the statutory requirements if one of the options is chosen. So it's just go forward. All you're voting on is go forward and make this happen as quickly as possible.
Because it talks about roles and responsibilities in the motion. I'm reading the motion, I'm hearing clarification that's different a little than the motion. The motion says that you are going to put together a memorandum of understanding to clarify roles and responsibilities of what board staff and DOE staff are going to do.
Correct, when conducting these.
So we're approving a process to take place. I'm not sure why we're approving a process that you could just go ahead and do that, number one. And number two, my question is, once you develop this memorandum of understanding, when are you going to bring it back to this board for approval?
I mean, we can, so if the board wants us to bring it back, we can certainly do that. Last year when we did the SQRs, the board approved the MOU and staffs went ahead and drafted the MOU, laid out roles and responsibilities, and then conducted the SQRs. So our thinking was we do a similar, do it similarly this year, but certainly we can bring back the MOU for the board to look at, or else distribute it so the board, by email so the board members can see it.
So this is a new process in statute. We've never had an exit process, so it's new. And so we decided that we would institute the very similar kind of process that we've done before, because we know what we're going to be doing in the hearings, and we just go forth. But we want direction from the board to begin that process.
I guess I would appreciate have it coming back for a vote, not for advisory. When you're talking about roles and responsibilities, that's really important. And I've had some comments from the field about these procedural kinds of things. And so if that's a friendly amendment, if I need to make an amendment, I'll do that. Or we could just have an understanding that it'll come back to this board for a vote.
That's fine, and the rules and responsibilities, again, just to clarify, would just be how the hearings would be
Yes, just on the
conducted.
hearing.
Okay.
Obviously, board members would be invited to be there, obviously. It's a board hearing.
So it'd be an easy process to come back, get our approval, is what you're saying?
We could, yeah, certainly.
Okay, thank you.
But you don't want to hold it, I mean,
But-
for at least for Gary Edison School, you may.
Yeah, it's going to delay
I
the
think we should probably move
process.
forward on that, at least scheduling hearings and getting court reporters and that kind of thing. That does take time, getting calendars ready. The goal was to hopefully get a date set by Friday, maybe even Monday.
Right, I'm not suggesting we delay, I'm just asking for, to see that final document so that we feel comfortable as a board what the roles and responsibilities are. These are really serious things for these schools that are going through the process, and I just want to be sure that we're comfortable with who's doing what and who's being held accountable for what.
So Leanne was next, and then Sarah.
So my request, when we had a community hearing at West Side this past year, there were very few parents or students in attendance. And when I was walking in, several people in the audience said to me the timing was not good. It was early. If people worked, they would have to take off from their job to attend. And so what my request would be, when we hold the hearings, that we make sure that we have them late enough so that people that work would really be able to attend, because it is very, very important for the schools and the community, and we want the people that are affected most, those current students and parents, to have an opportunity to speak to us.
We'll do that.
Sarah?
Just a quick response to Dr. Freitas's request. While I wholeheartedly agree on the importance of getting this right, I just want to ensure that we don't delay the process even further going through. So I hesitate a little bit with having that MOU specifically come back to us, just because it would stall it until the next meeting as well. But I absolutely want to make sure that we are on the same page and that we are moving forward in an appropriate manner there.
If it helps, the duties and things we're talking about are paying for a court reporter, scheduling the room, public notices, those kind of things.
Who's running,
which we do regularly, so the department will probably be doing those things. So to Sarah's comment, this is supposed to be done earlier, so we want to get these, because the A through F grades coming out when they came out, had to push it back a little bit.
I have a question.
Yes, Eddie.
After the hearing that we hold, how soon are we expecting a response from the board to the district or to the management company?
I'd say with all deliberate speed. So, you know, there isn't a specific time limit, but I think staffs will work to provide the comments as quickly as possible, and in addition, summaries of the comments, and then, you know, begin the discussions as soon as possible about what a recommendation would be. And, you know, hopefully we can have a joint recommendation between staffs as how to proceed, and then proceed from there. But it would be as soon as we can, especially with Roosevelt.
In the hearing, will we hear from the management company as well from the districts, or is it just going to be?
Yeah, we discussed that, and that would, yeah, we would want Edison to make comment in some form.
All right.
Any more discussion? So just to clarify the motion, there's a motion to approve entering into a memorandum of understanding with the Department of Education for the purpose of conducting the hearings required by IC 20-31-9-9C. And it's been seconded, and we've had discussion, so roll call.
Dr. Bertram? Yes.
Dr. Yes.
Dr. Freitas? Yes. Mr. Henry?
Yes.
Ms. Blankowski?
Yes.
Mr. Melton?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. Watts?
Yes.
Mrs. Wicker?
Yes.
Dr. Yeager?
Yes.
Superintendent Ritz?
Yes. So, David, to go back to your point, are you wanting to make a motion that the board actually approve the memorandum? Because that was not in the motion.
It was my understanding from our chief counsel that would happen. Do you need for us to make it official or not?
I would recommend that the board, in this instance, approve staffs going forward, and then rather than having, my recommendation would be rather than having the board take an official vote at the March meeting, we will provide it to the board. And if there's, you know, we can address specific concerns that way rather than having to wait until March. That would be my only concern, because we need to begin the logistics of this.
Yeah, I agree with the vice chair that we can't delay this. So I'm comfortable with that given the timeline, and would ask that it be emailed to us as soon as it's ready prior to the March meeting.
Yeah, we're very close, and we're very close to having that
thank you.
completed.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is under discussion, assessment update. Danielle?
Thank you, and I apologize that Dr. Walker's not with us today, so I'm going to do my best. I know she is a favorite presenter. She does a great job on these. So with that, the first thing that we want to present to you today is date change requests. In previous years, you may recall that we've brought to you, in some cases, date changes requested from local schools on the windows in which they're giving their ISTEP exams. Those date changes we've brought to you in the past have been when the date range exceeds 7 days outside of the already established window. So what you received in your board packet is there were a list of schools, 57 to be exact, but none of those requests fell outside the 7 days. So we have at the department, or you have given to the department, the authority, as long as it's within 7 days, for us to do the approval. So those have been done. So there are no new date changes to bring forth for action for you. So this is just an update of those 57 schools. The next update here is regarding ISTEP and IREAD 3. So we are still in the process, based on the readiness tests, determining the needs of the field in terms of technology and paper pencil. But I want to bring you an update on the readiness test that took place on January 29th in comparison to the readiness test that took place on January 20th. There is a Pearson summary that essentially shares that there were no widespread issues at all within the readiness test that happened on the 29th. In fact, over the course of that Friday's test, they recorded more than 180,000 logins and sustained a peak of more than 50,000 concurrent users, which is more than double the volume that was on the first readiness day of the 20th. And so the volume and the increase of velocity of use and the ramp up I think we heard about, all of those things were actually far greater than they were on the 20th, and there were no problems experienced in the field widespread. So the summary of that is, from Pearson's report, is that they don't anticipate, they believe the things that they did to manually ramp up and all the changes Michelle described to you last meeting did in fact have a positive outcome on the readiness and the field. So then finally...
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Yeah, may.
What's widespread mean?
So they monitored everything, and in terms of calls into the call-in center or anything like that, in their report, Dr. Yeager, they use the word low. So I'm sure there are people that call in with questions, but in their report they describe most of those things were either local and they could be fixed. At the minutes of 10:17 and 10:25, for example, there was a 2 to 3 minute lag experienced by some schools in the field, but then it was self-corrected. So those are some of the things that they share when they talk about low incidences and things that were quickly determined to be repaired, if you will, is the only word that comes to mind right now.
Thank you. I would just report that one school district contacted me. The first stress test was a 26% fault rate, or whatever we want to call that. The second one was 20%, which is still unacceptable. When Pearson gets up here in a little bit, I'll ask those questions again. I'm just reporting what I'm hearing. So.
Sure, I appreciate that.
Thanks.
Carrie? Carrie?
I am pleased I didn't get as many complaints and concerns after the second stress test. There were still some. And I know word was sent out today regarding schools that have concerns about the technology, and I want to make sure that, because it is a high-stakes test, that the medium that the students receive it on is not the concern, that, you know, we're focusing on the students and their abilities, and that's not standing in their way. In the memo sent out, and I haven't had a chance to read it very, very closely, the schools are to report to Pearson, I believe, their concerns, and I just want to, again, make sure that if Pearson feels like they can, you know, that there was not a problem, if the school still feels like there was a problem, that the schools still have the opportunity to request paper pencils, so that we just don't end up at the end with, you know, the concern about the technology being the reason for, you know, their concerns about student scores.
Leanne, and then Sarah?
So I would concur with that. There's such little faith with ISTEP. And then we had the readiness test 1, and I do understand it's a readiness test to get us prepared, but when schools across the district or across the state all had issues, any confidence that this new assessment was going to work that quickly, people were fretting about it quickly. And so any chance that we can give people reassurance so that we can start having faith in the results again, I think would be important for us. And so when Pearson says that they had little incidences, my question back would be, how many times did students have to be resumed? Because even if it only takes 1 second to resume a student, just having a student kicked out and having to get back in puts stress on the student, on the teacher, on the principal. And so it may be an easy fix to resume them, but it still can be problematic in people's eyes. So with that, I would also, one thing that we've learned is that with the Pearson system, so this may be more for Pearson than for you, but in the past, CTB, as well as the tests that we use for WIDA and Questar, they built into the system not to block any apps. So if you have a Java update and it comes across your system, it wouldn't kick students out. Well, Pearson doesn't have that. And so with all the different computers, anytime there's an update, that's going to kick a student out. And so our technicians are saying they feel that this was really lazy software development. And so that makes me wonder, you know, if we're putting all of our resources into it, how can we assure that it's the very best system of all? And then one more before I send it over to Sarah, and that's with the proctoring. So right now, and this, it's my understanding, is going to be a DOE decision. Right now, the proctoring, so resuming students, can be done by the corporation test coordinator or the school test coordinator. So I'll give an example of our high school. We have 3,600 students at our high school. So we are testing, you know, over 1,000 students. We run about 15 labs of 30 students each. So we have the associate principal and me are the two people that can resume tests. So when you have that many tests going and we have 6 to 10 students being kicked out in each lab, it really is not a very efficient system. And so my request would be that we let teachers have access to resume, but only for resuming tests. So they wouldn't have permissions to do anything else in the system, but permissions to be able to resume those tests as students get kicked out in those sessions. So if it happens with our district, I know any other large districts have the same type of issues that we have.
And I'd love to hear, you know, obviously Dr. Walker's and Pearson's response to that. As I understand it, that prior to this year, it actually had to be done through the vendor, that the schools were actually having to call for the reset to CTB. Is that possible in your recall?
Yes.
So we've already made this decision to go ahead and make it somewhat more simplified by allowing school level access. So you're requesting one step further, which would be even more school level access to reset.
A teacher to resume.
Okay, and I would love to.
In fact, if you don't mind, I think Pearson perhaps should come up here and address just the readiness test while we're on that topic.
Happy to.
Sarah, did you have a question for them?
Yes,
Pearson?
I was going
Okay, I think that will help us a little bit.
Good morning, Superintendent Ritz and members of the board. I'm Rich Young with Pearson. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
So I think we have 3 questions. So Carrie, why don't you repeat yours?
My question is regarding my question's regarding the use of the technology. I understand that's the optimum. I understand it's, you know, the direction we're going, but I also understand it's just not where everybody's at across the state. And I don't want the technology to be the reason for a student to, or a school or a corporation to feel like their test results are questionable in any way. And so if they feel, maybe perhaps on your end, the stress test was, you know, low in terms of problem, if they feel that that's maybe not the case, or that their technology is old, or for whatever reason, you know, they've been sent a document that says they can request, you know, paper, pencil, and they're to request it through you, and I just want to confirm that those, you know, will be considered and that schools will have that option.
Yep, that's true, yes.
All right.
I don't know, did it mention a deadline on it? Do you know offhand?
She said, yeah.
You two can tag team.
Yeah, so at the February 5th is the deadline for the schools to request.
So February 5th.
February 5th. And then that's been sent to CTs many times, I think even as recent as yesterday. And then once received, Pearson and the department will consider those requests based on the information we have on help desk requests, technology, infrastructure, and so forth locally, and then make a determination, and then they will open a window for ordering of paper pencil products.
And is that for part 1?
It is for part 1.
Part 1.
Right, and I read, and that opening window of ordering materials will go through February 15th.
Okay, so that's for part 1, and then for part 2, should they be turning in the same request now for part two? I mean, when they're looking at that deadline, schools are wondering, you know, if I were in their shoes, I would be thinking, do they need to turn it in the next 2 days for part two also?
This is just for part one's deadline, February 5th.
Steve, you had a question, and then we're going to go back to Leanne, and then Sarah, and then Vince. Steve?
I'm not sure whether my question is germane to this part of the presentation. He's coming back up later.
Okay, so not, your question's not on the readiness test.
Well,
That's okay.
It is, but.
Oh, then go ahead now.
So respond to the 26% first test, first stress test, and 20%.
Sure.
And I know it's not corporation-generated issues. I also know of another district where the high school was better, but the elementaries were not, and middle schools were not. It's still not fixed, and even if it's, what was the term that was used? Widespread? That's still not acceptable. So
well,
let's continue on with that.
Yeah, and we understand that perception is reality. So each individual school and school corporation's experience is their own, and that's their reality. In some places it goes better than in others. It's all very dependent on technology and how things are set up. We have an army of people out in the field and at home on our help desk available to help work through those issues and to kind of optimize those configurations. When I say that there was that it was a success, you know, there were no widespread issues, I'm really kind of speaking to, there are two elements of readiness. One is the readiness in the field, making sure that the local configurations are ready, and then there's readiness on our end to make sure that our configurations are ready and that we've got the capacity in place and so forth to, you know, take on the full load of operational testing. From that standpoint, we feel like the readiness test last Friday was successful. We did not see common issues popping up in lots of locations simultaneously like we did on the 20th. And so when we say there were no widespread issues, that's kind of what we're referring to. Now, we did see, of course, Ms. Kwiatkowski's district was one of these, and you did an excellent job, by the way, of summarizing all of the information and all of the issues that were experienced. I mean, I've never seen such detail as that before, and it's really very helpful. But there were locations that still are not quite there, and so we have people out there today, all the way through the start of testing on the 29th, and in between even, you know, after part one is done, we'll have people available to continue helping folks get ready for part two.
Leanne, did that answer yours?
Okay. So my understanding is TestNav doesn't end or stop all the processes of other apps starting up.
Right.
And so when that happens, the computer reacts as if it's a security issue and it kicks students off.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the past, with every other state test we've had, with, you know, WIDA, with CTB, with Questar for our ECAs, that's been built into the program. And so there may be ways at the local level that we can correct that, but you know, that puts a lot across the entire state of technicians trying to figure out solutions.
Yeah.
And so is there a way that you would be able to get that built into the system so that schools wouldn't be victims of updates, which we can't control when apps are updating?
Sure. First of all, let me just reassure you, this was not lazy programming. We've been doing this for 15 years, and we've been dealing with this issue for 15 years. Every school is different. In some schools, every computer is different. And you know, there's constant updates taking place with software, apps being downloaded, Java being updated, et cetera. These are all things that have the potential to interfere with TestNav's operation, as you pointed out. And we, you know, the primary goal is to make sure that students aren't exiting the program to use other system resources, looking on the internet or what have you. So that's why we lock that down. When those other processes try to jump in front of TestNav, it appears to the system that maybe the system, the student is trying to get out and access some other things. So that's why it shuts down and says, okay, we need to have your proctor restart you. There are choices that you make in engineering as to how to handle that. You can whitelist the applications that you allow to run on the computer, but then you start running into questions and concerns about kind of imposing or impeding or interfering with local setups. So if the system comes in and says, I'm only going to allow test nav and this to run, now you're kind of stepping on toes, if you will, with the technology that's there. The other approach is kind of a blacklist, where you say, here are all the programs that we want to block from running that might jump in front of test nav. Well, that's sort of a fool's errand, because that list never ends. I mean, there's always new programs and things coming up. You can never finish that list to try and block everything that's out there. So we do the best we can to make good choices about how that engineering handles those things. And what you see is, that you referred to earlier, yes, students do get exited if the system tries to jump in front, but that's part of the configuration instructions that we provide very early on for people to try and block as much of that as possible. And so that I think addresses the question that you raised earlier. The other part, I saw that email yesterday on HEC as well. The other part that he raised in that email was an issue about having dual monitors. And I just wanted to address that as well. That really is an equity issue. And so we don't currently allow that, because not every student in the state is going to have the benefit of having dual monitors. And so you really want as an equitable testing situation as possible, so that every student has as similar an experience as possible. If you've got two monitors, then you're kind of creating a benefit or an advantage for those students, and that's just really not fair.
Sarah? Oh, sorry. So my other question then would be with the proctoring. Is there a way that a teacher could proctor, not with the full access as a corporation test coordinator or a school test coordinator, but have the rights to be able to resume those tests?
Yes. In fact, I was just trying to look up online to confirm this. I believe there are additional roles within the system. So there's a corporation test coordinator and a school test coordinator. They have powers, if you will, within the system to do certain things. There are other roles that have more restricted access, or that can do fewer things. One of the things that a corporation test coordinator or school test coordinator can do is create other users and give them any powers that they have or less. And so I needed to verify, there are two additional roles called a proctor and an examiner. They have very similar rights within the system, but I believe that one of the rights they do have is to resume a student. So they can be in managing those sessions, and if a kid gets kicked out, be right there to get them restarted. So look into that and trying to create those additional roles and accounts for the people who are right there in the room with the kids while they're testing.
So I would recommend if DOE could provide guidance to the field about how that can be set up, that would be great.
Yeah, we did training on that in early December, but I think it does bear repeating. So
because when I look at the chart of rights right now, it doesn't show that a teacher would have that right.
Okay.
And so maybe just gain clarity on that.
Yep, thank you.
Sarah?
Just a couple of questions. And to begin, just to follow up on, I'm really concerned about this whole app blocker and the idea that we could be having continued issues.
Yep.
Just while I respect not wanting to overstep in terms of what the program does within individual schools' systems, I guess I'm just curious why this is something that has always been able to work for Indiana and now cannot.
I think there are just differences in the way systems are engineered, to be honest with you. As you pointed out, Ms. Kwiatkowski, Questar and DRC and CTB and Pearson all wrote different systems. We all came from different experiences, in the industry, working with different states, different lengths of time and so forth. It's really just a matter of how each system has evolved. And there are an awful lot of commonalities across those systems in the way that they operate, but there are also subtle differences, and that's just one of them.
So when you say that configuration directions were sent out, is that something that can be done? I apologize for my lack of technology know-how.
That's all right, and
but
I'll
is that
apologize.
something that can be done wholesale from district office? Is that something that has to happen individually on each computer or within each login? I know that some of my students can, make changes when they are logged in as themselves, but then those changes don't apply to the computer for other students. So how does that have to function in order to be an effective way of keeping our students from being kicked out?
That also varies greatly from school to school based on their local policies in terms of how they manage those devices and how they manage student accounts. Some schools and corporations allow complete admin rights to students on their devices. They can do anything they want with those things. Others, of course, lock them down and restrict what students can do and what they can access very tightly. Some corporations have tools that allow them to push things out to these devices so that it's almost as easy to manage 1,000 machines as it is to manage the one right there in your hands. So those capabilities vary greatly from one school to another.
And I hope that's something that we continue to monitor, because from my perception, that has the potential to be catastrophic in terms of administration of the test. Just a few other questions. I know that within your report, you spoke about how the system will be amped up. And again, I'm probably not using the correct terminology, but the system would be amped up in response to that heavy volume in the beginning. Is that something that has the potential to ebb and flow throughout the day, or is that a one-time get them going in the morning? I'm thinking of a scenario where maybe after lunch, we have a higher number of students that get on. Does the amp up from the morning cover us for the day?
Yeah, essentially. You're talking about the pre-warming, I think.
Yeah, I'm sorry, the pre-warming.
To get the system ready, yeah. Once that's done, the system has its own capabilities for dynamically growing and shrinking capacity based on demand. And it's kind of like waking up the security guard, and making sure that they're on duty. And once they're awake, then, things are all good. But to answer your question, yes, we'll be able to handle the fluctuations, the peaks and valleys throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the entire test administration window.
Okay, and one final question.
Sure.
The inclusion of CloudFront that was introduced in December, I believe, to go with the program, has that been used in other states, or is that a first-time use in Indiana?
If I remember correctly from the first report, that was something that we introduced with a release in December, and have administered a couple of million tests since that point in time. I don't know the states or what tests those were, but we had some experience with that. I think what we saw differently with the statewide readiness test was that rapid acceleration in volume that we hadn't seen before. And so again, this is why the statewide readiness test is so helpful. It allows us to do things on our end that we haven't experienced before with Indiana or in other states. One of the other things that we've just learned recently as well is that when you create a large session in the system for, say, 1,500 students, for example, that can really start to interfere with other people's ability to manage their sessions. And so we've put this guidance out to the field. We need to reiterate this. This is something else that we've also learned from Indiana that we haven't seen before, is people creating these ginormous sessions and the impact that those have on the system and other people's ability. So it's a learning process. It's an iterative thing, and we're confident that we'll get through it.
And I guess just how do we, with it being introduced 2 months before full application of our state test, and knowing that there is a negative perception surrounding the test in general, how do we tell our colleagues, or how do we instill some confidence in our colleagues that this new program will work and be efficient for our actual application of ISTEP?
I think there's a lot of additional training that's coming up. We have 10 regional training sessions with 2 sessions, 10 regional training sites with 2 sessions per day at each of those sites from February 8th through the 26th coming up, so starting next Monday. And there will be a lot of additional information provided to people. I think one of the things that we can do, I mean, it's all about communication ultimately, is making sure that it gets filtered out to everybody who needs it. There are some helpful reminders that people can, that they may have missed early on or have forgotten by now, that they just need to be aware of as they go into live testing. You know, go in with your eyes wide open. Things like the pop-up blockers and you know, the fact that if a student does get exited from the system, you have the ability to resume them. You know, being exited from the system could happen for lots of different reasons, and you know, some of them are student-driven, some of them are system-driven, some of them are, you know, based on other things trying to interfere. It's important that people understand that there are a bunch of different reasons that this could happen, but it's even more important that they understand what to do afterwards. So I think getting all those kinds of reminders out to people and really focusing on pushing out the communication as best we can is going to help everyone tremendously.
Vince?
Yes, thank you. Just a couple of questions. And put this in context from my perspective, I lead a technology company, so I believe in technology as a tool to facilitate learning and things that should provide a very effective way for students to access information, to create, to develop, and it should lead to effectiveness. But it seems, and one of the points you made earlier, is that it's really important to have control over the testing environment.
Yes.
How could we possibly have control over the testing environment in such a disparate system in which we're relying on 300 plus school districts to have the infrastructure, the tools that actually create that equitable testing environment? And why is it that we test millions of students across this country every year, the SAT, the ACT, and AP on paper and pencil? You know, and it would seem to me that the only way that we could actually create that kind of environment and not let the technology get in the way is to just eliminate it.
Yeah.
And give students the tests like we test in many other areas. And again, I believe in technology, but what I don't believe is having a technology solution that doesn't work. And the fact is, the technology is becoming the barrier to the credibility of the system, rather than the system itself. And that's a real challenge. And I just challenge us to rethink the way we're delivering this and not believe that technology has to be the solution to everything.
Yeah. Not to get too philosophical or on a soapbox too much here, but you know, there's a 20-year, 50-year trend, if you will, in the industry and in the economy. The jobs of the future are technology-based, and
yeah, but let's get real though. All right, our children use technology every day. We're talking about testing. We're talking about high-stakes testing.
Yep.
We're talking about someone, you know, one thing is to stand in front. Imagine how many of us have been in a situation in front of a board of directors, in front of a state board, in front of someone, and the technology doesn't work. And the situation it puts us in. We're doing the same thing to third graders.
I know.
And to fourth graders. We're putting them in a high-stakes environment with a technology that doesn't work. And it's absolutely unfair and unjust. And I think we have to solve that problem. So to think that this is the only way our students use technology is not accurate as well.
Yeah.
Our children use technology every day to
Yeah.
solve real problems. Now we're talking about testing.
Yeah.
Very different proposition.
Well, we believe that students should be allowed to be tested in a similar environment that they're instructed, and if they're receiving their instruction increasingly through technology, then the testing needs to follow that.
But again, we can assess students in a lot of ways using technology. This is the high stakes exam.
Yeah.
This is the one we're making a lot of decisions about students, about teachers, schools. We're grading our entire state based on these assessments. And we have to get it right. There's no room for error. We can't have 20% failure rate or 26%. We have to get absolutely right.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. I mean, that's everyone's goal. When we sat down with the superintendent a month or two ago, she stressed to us the importance of, you know, focusing on students, and that everything that she does, for example, is focused on what's the impact to students, and that's what we focus on as well. We have a lot of experience in doing this. We've worked with a lot of different states. These are policy level decisions. These are industry trends. you know, every customer is free to do whatever they feel is best for their students, and we try to do everything we can to support that.
Steve? Yeah, I'll do, David, would you have your hand up first?
I can't see it on the other end, so I don't know.
Go ahead, David.
Okay. Since Pearson is in multiple states, it gives us an opportunity from a macro policy level to get your insights. And so I've been concerned about the technology infrastructure in Indiana for a long time. I know the state superintendent has also and advocated for additional funds. And it's not only testing, but it's all kind of other things, online technology, sharing of courses and modules and teachers, and it's just a whole plethora of different things we could be doing in Indiana. Yeah. And so I'm concerned about the infrastructure. So as we look at assessment, we've had a roller coaster ride, I would say, with assessment, not from the concept of assessment, but more the technology. Sure. And I see technology a different issue than the assessment. So when technology doesn't work, it doesn't mean the test is suspect in any way.
Correct.
And for many people, they tend to combine those. So my macro question is, what we experience in Indiana with technology issues, is that common in all the other states, or are we unique?
No, I think what you're experiencing is very typical of, you know, when we've gone into a state for the first time, it's the same kind of experience. When any other vendor is going into a state for the first time, you know, getting into online testing for the first time is difficult. So last year, there were a few examples that I can think of, Ohio, New Mexico, Arizona, that were doing large-scale online testing for the very first time. And you know, they have some different challenges. They have, you know, in Ohio's case, they have some large urban areas, you know, more similar to Indiana. Arizona and New Mexico, for example, have vast rural areas where, you know, the technology and the connectivity is suspect. They actually were very successful for first year out. I just came from Arizona and was talking with them. They did approximately 44%, I think, of their tests online for the very first time last year. This year, they're projecting to do 70%, and they are dead set on reaching 100%. New Mexico was another state that had tremendous success their first time out, and despite the challenges that you can imagine would exist in an environment like that. So, you know, Indiana is a leader, I think, in technology. You have a tremendous amount of one-to-one and e-learning taking place here. You do have a lot of people out in the field that are very sophisticated in managing technology. We have benefited already from some of that, and you know, we're able to use those things to help benefit the industry as well. So it's really very much a give and take partnership type of arrangement. But I think what you're seeing is very typical of what most states have experienced.
How do we get to the point that we don't worry about this every year? It seems almost every meeting we're concerned, we're getting updates, and we have stress tests and all kinds of tests. And for me, the bottom line is, are kids being served? Yeah. When it comes time for the test. And so all these questions are really important, but and you're answering them in a positive way. But for me, it's testing day. Is it going to work? And our history has been mixed on that through no one's fault. It's a technological issue. How do we get beyond this worrying every year? Is that possible that we can do that?
Well, yeah, I think so. I'm an optimist, if you can't tell. It's an evolutionary process, and you know, change is hard. So first time out with anything is going to be difficult, adapting and changing. And as you gain more experience with that, it's supposed to get better, right? I mean, that's the goal, is continuous improvement. And that's also been very consistent with our experience in states, is that, you know, the first time's not perfect, the second time's better, and by the third time, you know, it's like, okay, we got this. You'll get there. I mean, Indiana will get there. I'm confident of that. You have the people out there with the skills and the drive to make it happen. It's going to take a little bit of patience and all of us, you know, working together and really focusing on that communication that I stressed earlier.
Last question, I promise. This is an important one. The notion that we have the authority to have online testing paper and pencil testing or both is within our authority to do that.
Absolutely.
And so the notion that was shared today of maybe just having paper and pencil tests, and I understand your initial comment about students will learn online, and that might be an important ingredient. But what would be the downside to going to just a paper and pencil test in Indiana and eliminate the online portion since it's been so troublesome?
Yeah. Probably the first would be cost. It is more expensive ultimately to have a paper and pencil, manual, lots of manual effort that goes into delivering an assessment like that. Turnaround time, getting your results back, it takes time to ship things back and takes time to scan them and score them. With online delivery, that is much quicker. Those are probably the two that come immediately to mind. And then, the sort of more philosophical topics in terms of are you preparing your students to be successful in the workforce?
Okay, thank you.
Leanne, oh, wait a minute. Somebody was down here, Steve. Go ahead, Steve, and then Leanne.
I just want to reassure myself you are coming back up to the podium.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
because I have other questions, but take us a different direction.
Correct.
I don't want to do that.
Despite the grilling, I'll be back every time.
As we look at this, Dr. Bertram, I wholeheartedly agree with your comments, and I worry, certainly worry about the impact on girls and boys and teachers and parents across the state. But I want to make sure that we all understand that it's really not you. This might be a case and a cause for the state to say, okay, everybody's using the same computer, and the same computer system would certainly make your job a lot easier. So I can't imagine trying to go to 330 plus school districts and trying to get them all to comply with one set of parameters. So I just want you to know that I do understand that from that standpoint, but also your promise to us was it's going to work. So I just wanted to reinforce that. That's it, Superintendent.
Leanne?
Do you know, I get phone calls from principals and teachers and students, and so where you're standing, I'm having to respond and answer to those very same questions. So I do apologize if it feels like we're drilling you, but it's very, very important.
I know that what you're putting on me is nothing compared to what they're putting on you. So
I mean, we just want to get
happy
it
to be
right
here.
for our students. So my question is, as I heard you talking earlier and explaining, it sounded like for the first readiness test, you tried some trial things which were cost savings technology. And so my question is, why would we apply that to Indiana when we have been so fractured with ISTEP and we're trying to gain confidence? And you had the very first time to get it right, and it wasn't right at all. And so, you've been in the audience and heard CTB, and so I just don't understand why the first time out we didn't make sure that we had everything in place to get it right.
Well, we thought we did, and we weren't trying out something new on Indiana. This was what we learned from the first experience. Came as the result of a decision we had made months ago, probably 9 months ago, to implement this new technology within the load balancing system. And we had lots of experience with it, with our own internal testing, with external testing, a couple of million tests, I think it was, that had been administered through that system. And so we just came across a new use case, if you will, that showed this new approach, was maybe not quite as optimal for this specific kind of ramp up that we thought it would be. And so we learned from that. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, so, I know when we always want to learn and grow and improve.
Yeah.
But boy, if you have things that work, I would say don't be trying them now with us. Let's just, your systems that work, let's continue using those.
Yeah, yep.
And then my second then will be, once again, we're going to have online versus paper pencil results. and the question's going to come up again are these equitable assessments.
Mm-hmm.
And so very early on, and I know that we've asked this question to before, make sure that people understand if they're equitable, and if not, you know, let's be upfront with that rather than
Yep.
afterwards.
Yeah,
So thank
our
you for that.
psychometricians and others have been working very closely with CTB for months to understand the methodology that they used and to be able to replicate that with complete accuracy. I mean, we understand what programs they used, we understand what parameters they put into those programs, and the data that they ran and how they scored everything. We recognize that absolutely has to be there, that it has to be consistent, and working really hard to make that happen.
Byron, and then Vince.
Yeah, I appreciated your comment on looking at the reality of school, you know, an overall success, but then the reality, you know, your reality is reality, right?
Yeah.
And trying to question someone else's reality is pretty futile, but learning from it's important, right? And so for me, you talked about the regional trainings that we were going to have.
Yep.
And I think sometimes it's interesting because when I sit here and I hear the questions and the questions that we get, and you think, boy, I'm privy to things that others aren't, right? And so how do we get to a point where everyone in the field, because I heard this from the principals last Friday as well, one of the things that they discussed was just not knowing, and part of it is not knowing what you don't know to even ask the right question.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems to me that somewhere we're lacking, I don't know whether it's PD on it, information, what you push versus what we as a school would pull. You know, if we look at that whole pushing information versus pulling it sometimes, and that. So I don't know whether I'm asking a question or a comment, but are we not doing something that we should hear? What's your perspective on that?
I don't think there's, I don't know how to phrase this correctly. I don't think there's not something that we're not doing. I don't know if I got that right or not, but to answer your question, I think we're doing everything that we can. It comes down to communication again. We all suffer from information overload and have more than enough on our inboxes to deal with every day. You know, we're doing everything we can to be iterative about communication because we know people don't get it the first time or maybe don't pay attention the first time. That's fine, we understand that. We're being as iterative, trying to be as iterative and as timely as we can with that communication so that when people need it the most, they're more likely or most likely to get it. And you know, that's between us and the department and the field, that's really an important thing to focus right now.
So will all the things that were talked about here today, will those be in those regional trainings?
I don't know exactly everything that's in there. That's kind of a hands-on technology oriented for test coordinators. You know, how to move students from one session to another. What do you do if a student comes in, you know, at the last minute? What if you have students in your system that have moved out of the school or the district or the corporation rather? All those kinds of situational things will be covered in that training, and those are really where the rubber hits the road, if you will, in the rooms, like Ms. Kwiatkowski referred to, that those people need to understand and have that exposure.
And questions get answered.
Yeah.
So the test coordinators will be able to ask those technical questions.
And they're going to feel overwhelmed when they go through that. You know, that's why we have our help desk and why, you know, we try to get that out as early as possible and you know, provide as many resources and channels as we can to help them.
Vince?
Yeah, just a couple of follow-up questions to a couple statements you made. I want to reiterate something. I think it's a specious argument to suggest that not testing or testing paper and pencil isn't preparing our students for the real world. Our teachers and students use technology every day in their lives 24/7. So, you know, the one test not being done on computer, I don't think is a difference between our students being successful after high school and not. So that's the other is you said that there would be an increased cost. Approximately how much and what % would it cost in paper and pencil over a computer-based test?
So I have to remember the exact numbers. In our contract, you know, we actually broke this out so that we would be able to adjust the cost of the contract based on actual volumes at the end of the year. for paper and online delivery. And there's a per student amount for online, and there's a per student amount for paper. It varies by subject area because the amount of work involved and the amount of materials involved and so forth varies by subject area. But if I remember correctly, it's in the neighborhood of $6 to $8 per student, depending on whether they have 2 tests or 3 tests for the grade that they're in. $6 to $8 per test, per student for paper, an additional cost. And flipping that around, $6 to $8 of savings for every test that you administer online.
Okay, second, you also talked about turnaround time.
Yeah.
Since we're accustomed to such quick turnaround time on our tests anyway, what kind of turnaround time, what is the difference between the 2 exams in terms of getting information back to teachers?
You mean between paper and online?
Yes.
So where the additional time comes in is, number one, in shipping. So boxing up the materials after the test is taken, shipping them back to us. That adds probably 2 weeks in and of itself. And then once they arrive at our facility, getting everything opened and sorted through and scanned and so forth, that probably adds maybe another 2 weeks or so to the process. The actual scoring and reporting, once you've got the materials, you've got the data collected, that's the same. You know, it's just really that front end delay in getting the paper boxed up, shipped back, processed, and scored.
Okay, so I'm gonna give you one scenario, just like your perspective. This is my last question. When you look at delivering an online test to 800,000 students, or whatever the number is, and it's going out on each individual computer and across multiple platforms, infrastructures, versus the same students taking a pencil and paper test, sitting in a classroom proctored by a teacher. Forget cost, forget turnaround time. Given the equitable treatment of both of those, given the reliability in terms of things getting in the way of students actually performing on that test, what do you have the greatest confidence in that we're going to get the results that truly measure student performance, online or in that paper environment?
Right. Are you referring to results being comparable and equitable regardless of?
I'm talking about what we get from a student, in terms of the barriers between the student and actually the performance on the test.
Being able to truly measure their
that is correct. Not
skills
the
and abilities.
comparability of the 2 tests, but just in terms of any kind of impediments that would exist or for students to perform on that test. What would you have the greatest confidence in that we can truly measure the student performance?
I would have to say our research and also the industry's research into those kinds of issues. So comparability between paper and pencil is something that has been in the journals for the last 15 years, literally. It's there all the time, and it will continue to be. There's also a lot of usability research in terms of how students interact with test questions online, the thought processes that they go through, the interactions that they have with the system itself, and whether those confound the measurement. And I'm starting to really kind of get above my pay grade here on this. If those things kind of confound the measurement that you see in the results, or if they are essentially immaterial. Tremendous amount of research done on that as well. And then I think the last area that we focus on, and this is becoming probably the last 2 to 3 years a much greater area of focus, is accessibility and accommodations for students. Not only in terms of the system tools and capabilities that are there to provide color contrast or Zoom or various other kinds of assistive devices and so forth, but also just in the language of the test. So universal design and making sure that the language, the way that the test questions are written, are more accessible to students. And that applies equally across paper and online delivery.
Okay, so now if you could answer my question.
All right, maybe I didn't understand.
What would you have the greatest confidence in?
What do I have the greatest confidence
in?
Either
Yes, in terms
paper
of
or online?
Yes.
Well, I'm going to show my bias a little bit, and I'm a computer science major by training, and I have a business minor. I kind of came up as a technology person, a math and science person as well. So my bias would be towards technology. I understand your point about paper and pencil. Pencil breaks, you go to the pencil sharpener and sharpen it back up, or you pull another one out of your backpack and off you go. I get that. But,
and I agree with that. And I think that's why our students take SAT and AP exams on paper.
But they are, I don't know if you know this though, but they are actually moving their tests online now too.
As an option.
I don't know if it's an option or if that's going to be eventually, the only option. That's completely their business decision on their part, but they are also moving that way.
I just, when you make the statement that we're doing everything we can and we're still not getting it right, that concerns me. And I just want to have more confidence. And I said this earlier, we're just making a lot of big decisions based on this.
Yeah.
And I don't want the technology to be the reason. I want to know how our students are performing, and I want confidence that that is the true measure of performance.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I'm also a perfectionist, and so I never stop until I feel like we've gotten to what you're describing, where those kinds of things are no longer a concern.
So I know we're giving, for the first time, some flexibility in the scheduling of the assessments and the order of which assessments are given for the test. And I was out in the field this week, and they were very appreciative of that. Does that have an impact on the actual load, so to speak, of those who are on certain tests and not on certain tests at a certain time?
No.
Okay.
No, that mix. In fact, I think the flexibility you've given schools this year to be able to administer math before ELA or ELA before math, and breaking the books up into separate subjects so that they can say, I want to do math online, or math on paper, and ELA online, and social studies on paper, and science online.
Correct.
That kind of flexibility is also beneficial, but the system can handle whatever you throw
Okay, so it
at
doesn't affect the load
No.
in any way. So I think we have one slide left.
I have one.
Oh,
one point.
on readiness.
Dr. Bertram asked the question that I was going to ask, and that was, which would you prefer? But it's the appropriate time for me to make this comment that this is an opportune time for us to think about, and I see we have an ESSA update coming up, and thank you for putting that on the agenda. Looking forward to that update. But the feds have given us a unique opportunity to review what we're doing and to make some decisions based on what's best for our girls and boys across the state. And I would hope that the state legislature, and I would hope that the state Department of Education, this board, would all work together to take advantage of those opportunities that can make a system or create a system or use a system that's much easier for our children, for our parents, for our school districts, and for educators across the state to take advantage of.
I was meeting with Dr. Hartzer this morning just before I came over, and shared with him there's a tremendous opportunity there for Indiana and for all states to innovate and to make some changes. I think one of the important things as you start to contemplate what you want to do differently is the impact on the field, of course. You've gone through a baseline reset, and that's been very disruptive. You've gone through changes in standards, and that's been very disruptive. I hope that we'll be able to have conversations about changes that will allow a measure of stability, that will allow you to get the kinds of changes you're looking for without having to reset baselines, and to be able to maintain those trends going forward. Those trend breaks are pretty disruptive, as you've already experienced.
In the meantime, it's important that we expect and will get this right. That's the most important thing, echoing what Dr. Bertram said.
I agree. We probably won't be perfect, but we're going to give it every ounce of will that we've got.
All right. Thank you very much for the readiness information. And your last slide, Danielle.
Thank you. I believe this was the only remaining slide,
Yes,
Superintendent?
it is.
And it was
Because we
just-
already did formative assessment.
Absolutely. And this is really a reiteration of part of what I just said regarding, well, the practice test we talked about in terms of, or no, I'm sorry. We talked about ordering paper pencil by February 5th. And then the field has also been alerted in multiple scenarios and in ways of different communication that the practice test, like last year, can be used for instructional purposes and not in a testing environment, but rather for the teacher and the student to work through together. And the superintendent mentioned this last one in terms of the flexibility. So I think really that was really everything within this presentation. Yes, Sarah.
Sarah?
Thank you. When you say piloting of future ISTEP items, is this wholesale or is this limited to the grade 10 and the iRead 3?
This is the Book 2 format that we've always used historically in Indiana, where there's a selection of certain schools, certain grade levels who get a Book 2 to begin banking pilot items for the future. Okay. So we are back to kind of the system as usual.
Right. I thought, though, that we had discussed potentially moving to a limited fall pilot for some of those items versus the operational. Is that not something that we are looking at, or is that?
Sure. Cynthia raised your hand. I don't recall. I don't believe we were looking at that for the ISTEP test pilots.
Okay.
No, we have not. The Book 2, it's like one additional subtest, 35 minutes roughly. It is typical in what has been done in the past. I would need to confirm if they're still looking at this. It's a stratified random sample of the students across the state, so not all students take it. It is only a select number of schools. Mm-hmm. And what they had ended up doing in the past was doing a robust sampling across a year or two, and then the school wouldn't be selected again, or they'd take a break on it. And so I don't know if that's where we're driving now or not, but it's where I would recommend going, because it's one thing to do the pilot. And my past experience was the same schools seemed to get selected every year, but then they would take a break, and then they wouldn't have to do it. And so, but it is this stratified random sample. It is representative, and it's given following the regular assessment. And no massive, like if a kid is sick, you don't make a big push to get them retested or any of that. It's one and done type thing.
Okay, thank you. Mm-hmm. And then I know that you had said we already did formative, so we don't need to touch on that. Correct. But I actually would like to, on the slide, one of the components was the implementation of the 16-17 program. Mm-hmm. So while we voted on this year's allotment, I would like to just touch on that for a minute. I know that we discussed it some at our last meeting, mm-hmm. and the obvious downfalls of schools receiving their final allotments or reimbursements so late in the year, mm-hmm. and that obviously impacting their abilities for certain programming decisions. So I would like just an update, if possible, of where we're looking in terms of the process moving forward. Mm-hmm. I know on the slide it says the process for schools begins in late spring, but what are we looking at in terms of speeding up the process by which schools actually have an idea of how much money mm-hmm. They can move forward? As I mentioned in our last meeting, it's more of a situation where schools are forced to make a decision based on what they can absorb if mm-hmm. the money doesn't come through at whatever price point they need to come through. So I just want to make sure that we are looking at giving as much flexibility mm-hmm. as possible so that schools that might have their hands tied could otherwise make decisions for the best formative assessments for their population.
And I think you've pointed out the obvious. We are certainly in a much better position for next year than we were for this year, because we were acting, late summer on the budget and so forth. So one, we had a lot of things that we've learned through the process in terms of the application, the simplicity, the type of information we were receiving in some cases wasn't the right information. So we're going to clean up, the tool that is used for the application process. We also this year used the October count date. We did our estimates early on for you all based upon the pupil enrollment counts from the previous year, but then ultimately we waited on the final counts. Dr. Walker is going to recommend the thinking really that we go off the current enrollment numbers to actually bring forth the dollar amounts. And then recognizing, the locals will have to recognize that could fluctuate, that my per pupil enrollment this spring may be different than my fall, but what is the better of the two, getting my money sooner or having an adjustment of 10 additional students not being able to be paid to receive the dollar amounts come payment amount. So those are some of the considerations. Okay. So I'll pause there.
So what do you anticipate in terms of timing for schools next year to receive? I mean, obviously February's late in the game.
Right.
When do you anticipate next year that schools will know what they're getting?
Sure. I don't want to speak for Dr. Walker. I know she wants to start it this spring, and like I said, if we can base it on the enrollment counts as school year's ending versus the fall counts, I don't see why it wouldn't be as early as school beginning. But again, I don't want to put a hard time to that.
Obviously, on my standpoint.
Yeah.
And that's part of why I was asking the question earlier, too, about that leftover funding. My understanding, again, not a funding expert either, but I had thought that once that money, if it wasn't spent basically in the calendar year that it was allotted, that would go back to the general fund. So I was just trying to get a better gauge of how much schools could actually expect to kind of be in that pot moving forward. So I think
I
it's
think
really
we
important that we
anticipate
clarify
12
that.
million, and hopefully 200-some thousand extra on top of that 12 million was what we're anticipating
Okay.
for year 2.
Yes, Leanne?
So I would also recommend, as you look through the process, any way of making it less burdensome for school folks would be great. So for example, rather than having to fill one out for each school, if there was an option where you could select all, if you know that all of you're using the same assessment for all schools, and you have to go in individually for each one, that, you know, a school district like Indianapolis Public Schools that have many schools, that would take a long time to complete.
No, I think that's a great
Please
suggestion.
consider that. Thank you.
I think this first go-around, we were very much seeking local choice and recognizing the option to go either way, cross grade levels differences, cross schools differences, but your point's excellent that they may not be choosing those, and so how can we make it more simple? It's great.
All right, let's take a quick break, a quick recess, and reconvene in 15 minutes. When we come back, we will perhaps have Pearson back up.